Hi everybody, welcome back to Embrace the Journey with Sharon, and my guest today is Dr. Linda Ballou. I am pleased to have her here. She is somebody that is doing really wonderful things in our community. She has started a foundation called P.A.R.K, which we'll touch on a little bit. And she has a beautiful bear with her today, which we'll share a little bit about that. The journey that Linda's been on comes from a place of loss, and so I've invited her today to share with us a little bit about what that is in your life and how it's impacted it and how you've turned it into something positive for others.
Thank you.
I appreciate you being here very, very much.
Thank you very much.
So if you'd share a little bit about who you were, what happened, and who you're turning into.
Well, that's a very good question to ask. My background was in medicine for many years, and then after that I went into sales and marketing, and for the last 30 years that's really what I've done.
Mm-hmm.
And I recently lost my daughter Debbie a year ago, and what made it so special is that she had worked with me for about 15 years in the different ventures that I would get involved with. She always got involved with too.
Mm.
So we had a wonderful relationship, and then there were times when they weren't so wonderful either, you know, when you've got two strong personalities.
Oh yes.
So you can probably relate. I was 17, just turned 17 when I got married, and I had 6 children in 7 years.
Wow.
So by the time I was 25, I had 6 children and was a cancer survivor. And I was a child
story
myself.
in itself. Yeah.
Yes. And so I literally...
And where were you? Where were you on this planet at that time?
I started out in North Platte, Nebraska.
Okay.
I went to Creighton University School of Medicine in Omaha. And as soon as I got my nursing degree, I packed up my children, I left my husband and moved to California with $400 in my pocket.
So
And
was there not a lot of opportunity in this area of Nebraska?
I did not want to be in Nebraska
Okay.
any longer. I'm from a very small town. Everybody knew everybody else's business.
Mm-hmm.
And I swore I would never go back. It did take me 35 years. But so I just packed them all up, and the youngest was 6 months old, and the oldest was just a little over 6 years old. And so we were very poor, needless to say. And it put a lot of responsibility on Debbie because she really became a second mother by the time she was 7 or 8 years old.
Okay.
Yes. And so she had a lot of responsibility with all these children coming up, and I had to work. So there were some really, really tough times, both financially and emotionally for me, and being a child myself, you know, I'd be down on the floor playing with them just like I would if I had just been a young teenager.
Mm-hmm.
But as they grew up, and as I expanded my horizons and left medicine and went into sales and marketing, Debbie, at the age of 15, met a boy that was not the right type of boy for her to meet. His family were very heavily into drugs. Mm-hmm. And he was a very good-looking, charismatic young man, and liked him as a person, but the family element was there.
Yeah.
And so I just absolutely told Debbie she could not have anything to do with him and his family.
I'm sure that went over well.
It did not go well. Not at all. And so...
there comes that strong will again.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Debbie has always been very much like me. I mean, our personalities were just cloned. And so when
Does
something
that mean
didn't
that
work...
when somebody says you can't do something, you're going to turn around and do it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I have that gene.
Me too. And so she came by it very naturally. And so one day, she had not quite 16 years old. Now, she was an A student. She excelled. She wanted to be a veterinarian, and she had her plans laid out. when I gave her, when I really put the law down and said, you're not even going to go out if this is the direction you're going to go, she went to school one day and never came home. And she disappeared. And that was one of the most horrible years of my life because we could not find her.
Yeah.
We had detectives looking and all kinds of people looking for her, and there was just no sign of her. We didn't know if she'd been murdered, what had happened to her.
Yeah, and that feeling inside of the last conversation that you had with her.
Yes.
As a
Yes.
mother, I'm sure that was something that you struggled with.
I did. It didn't take us long to find out that her boyfriend was missing as well. So when we found that out, it somewhat took the fear factor away of something really bad happening to her. In that sense.
Yeah.
We then became even more afraid that something was going to happen to her from the other side of the coin because of the exposure. And she was gone for a year. We finally just had to move on with our lives, and we got a transfer to New York City. And there was no way to contact her to let her know even where we went. And so we packed up, we moved to New York, and one day, about a year later, I get a call. Now she's 17 and a half.
Which was the age you were when you got married?
When I got married. And she said, Mom, I want to come home. And we had her on a plane 2 or 3 hours later. And a lot of people said, why didn't you just let her go? She made her bed, now let it. That's what you hear. But as a parent, it's very difficult to do that, at least for myself. And so we brought her to New York, and she was there for about 6 months. And 2 of our boys were very strong mischief makers. They were the 2 youngest, and so they'd gotten themselves into a scrape. I think they were 9 and 11 or something like that. And I was best friends with the chief of police. And they actually lived right across, the station was across the street from our house. And so I went over and asked them if they'd come over and arrest the boys, put them in jail, and just scare them to death.
Good for you.
And so they agreed to do that. Well, by us doing that, then they were going to take them to court. So they were going to walk them through the whole process just for a lesson type thing. Well, Debbie came on the scene the day that they were supposed to go to court, and she didn't know the story behind why they were there. So she goes over to the court with me when they have to go before the judge, and this big cop that was there who had technically arrested them, she was livid that somebody would do this to her brothers. And so she just, after court, she just tied into him a good one. Well, it ended up that they got married. And shortly thereafter, they moved to New Jersey, and then we were transferred back to California.
Wow.
So again, there was a break,
Yeah.
in the relationship, but it was very positive. And so we spent a lot of time in North Carolina with them, and we were very blessed that we got to be with her and her family the whole time that her boy and girl was being raised. It was our first grandchildren. And so we probably were closer than we had ever been. And that was going along quite well. And then she got involved. Well, first of all, she had an accident, and they gave her prescription drugs. Nothing like what's on the market today, but still, it was heavy-duty stuff. And she started taking that, and somehow or another, because she had been involved with drugs, illegal drugs, when she was with her boyfriend. So somehow or another, she got back involved with that again, and so because of the prescription drugs and because of the alcohol and the supplier that she met with the illegal drugs, she was getting herself back into a very bad situation. And
it happens quick.
It does.
It really does.
Once you're going back.
Yeah, because from my own personal experience, when you've done drugs, it's a progression. So even though I stopped 20-something years ago, if I picked up the drug today, it would be further down. It wouldn't be like the very first time that I did it.
Right.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. It's a smooth transition right
Yeah.
back into it. The 27 years are gone.
Yeah.
And at this time, she now has 2 children. So, it's a different ball game. And they're starting to get affected by it. And her husband gave her an ultimatum, and she went into treatment. And for 6 years, she did quite well. I mean, she did really well with the treatment. And then they started having marital problems, and it started to deteriorate again. And then she was in a horrific car accident. And during this time, I'm living a career in California and flying back and forth, to be with her and to be a support, watching these things going on and not wanting to isolate her again as I had when she was young. So actually I was becoming an enabler is what I was doing. And
out of the fear of loss.
Yes.
The fear of the possibility of it, of the separation.
And wanting to believe that, when she said everything was good, everything was good, even though I knew it wasn't. And so this went on for some time, and then she was in this horrific car accident. The people that hit her head on were killed outright, and she died twice, and they brought her back. And she was on life support for some time, and then we moved her into a nursing home. And by this time, she had gotten a divorce. And the courts had given the children to the father. Being a sheriff, he had a lot of pull. And so she was in the nursing home for 3 years. Every bone in her body had been broken, so she was made up of mesh and steel rods. And they said that she would never walk again, and she said, yes, I will. So she worked during those 3 years to be able to function normally. In the interim, of course, she was given tremendous painkillers, justifiably so because of how she was.
Because that's that 5% that we've talked about, that there is a 5% where these prescription drugs are needed.
That's right. And so as she started to walk again and she left the nursing home, in that period, that was about 9 years ago, we moved here to Sarasota, Florida. And she immediately called and wanted to come out and be close to us. And I was thrilled with that. So she came out the same week that I came out, and she was here for the whole time. And it was amazing because she was really working to control. She was on medication all the time. She had had 15 surgeries after the accident. So they were going on almost every year. But she was maintaining herself quite well. I mean, she wasn't dozing off. We didn't see the big mood swings. We didn't see any of that. And her last year, she had a heart attack, a stroke, and uterine cancer.
And at this point, how old is Debbie?
Debbie has just turned 49.
Just turned 49.
Yes.
49.
So she is out of that realm of being a teenager or a baby.
But she's still in this day and age at 49 or 48, most people would say, oh, you still have a lot more to go. We expect that.
Yes.
In the time that we live now.
But the other side of the coin is that I have found in this past year, doing all the research that I've done, and this is in the medical profession itself, people that are Debbie's age, they feel that they are old enough to know what they're doing. So the sympathy factor goes away. There is no sympathy. And you've heard me use the expression that nobody really cared about Debbie.
Yes, which I shared with you earlier that really stuck with me. And I want to tell you that there are people that care. I understand what you're saying related to the statistic part of it.
And that's what we're discussing.
But in the real world,
there were tremendous people that cared about her. But in the arena that should have cared, there was none. And so that was the first time she went in to have a hysterectomy at the hospital, and they gave her oxycodone for the first time. And here she had been battling this drug addiction for so many years. And within 6 months, it had ruptured her heart, and she died. And that was on her death certificate as a cause of death. was heart rupture due to oxycodone. So that was very, very difficult. We were very blessed from the standpoint that she could not work because she had some brain damage that was done from the car accident, and she had short-term memory loss. And so she wasn't able to really go to work, and her body wouldn't allow her to do anything strenuous. And it was getting worse as she got older with arthritis. And so she just, she was really just trying to survive. And I just lost my train of thought. It just went bye-bye. So we'll just keep going now.
Yeah.
But I was saying that we were really blessed because the state of Florida would not give her any kind of support financially. She couldn't qualify. Everybody else qualified, but not Debbie. So she had to have a surgery.
Because of her age, because of why?
There was never any rhyme or reason.
Okay.
There was never a
think-
better person that should have had
Yeah.
help, and she had zero.
Yeah.
And so it was really up to us to pay for her surgeries in cash before they'd do anything for her, and all of this stuff that was going on. The only thing she could get at no cost was the prescription drugs. That the doctors would give her. But when it came to surgeries to save her life, Sarasota Memorial turned her away. So we had to go in and we had to pay for the hysterectomy and all that stuff, or they wouldn't have even touched her. And that amazed me.
Yeah, because this is a whole nother
Another ball
that's
game.
a whole nother
Yes.
thing that exists in our world right now that just amazes me.
It does.
It really does.
And that was my first experience for that, to see this happening.
Because you come from a medical background. You
Yes.
were an RN, and
And we knew that this was something that was legitimate. It
Yeah.
wasn't something that was just being made up.
Yeah.
So she went, I talked her into going back to North Carolina because she could get on welfare in North Carolina very simply, just because they knew that she needed it and their laws were just a little more flexible. And so about 3 weeks before she died, she went back to Raleigh. And she would call me in tears and she'd say, I just don't want to be here. She said, I hate it here. She'd lived there for 20-some years. And she said, I just want to come back home. I want to come back to Sarasota. And I said, Debbie, you really need to stay there and get your surgery done for your heart, and then you come back. Well, in the interim, she had lost her car. They had repossessed it. And so she had no way to even get to the doctors. And my husband and I were sitting at dinner on a Tuesday night, and he said, how is Debbie getting around now that she's lost her car? And I said, she doesn't have a way. And he said, well, why don't we give her the Jimmy, let her fly out here, and we'll give her the car, she drives it back, and she'll have a way to get around. So I got right on the phone that night. It's just a fluke on how everything happens. I called her and I said, would you like to have the car? And she started to cry and she said yes. And I said, we'll have a plane ticket for you, come out on Thursday, which was 2 days later. And so she flew back to Sarasota, and it was the happiest I'd seen her in a long, long time. And so she was there, and we had a great day on Friday. And my son is the Baltimore Oriole bird. And they were here for spring training, and so she got to interact that Friday with her brother, him as a celebrity, if you will. And it was a marvelous day, and we had not had a family reunion in years. And it just happened that we were able to, that Saturday night, to have a family reunion. But prior to that, she had been a volunteer out at Moat Marine for several years. She was very educated with animals, and she was one of the very few people that was licensed to handle bald eagles if they were damaged or anything. So she was very talented, and she worked out there with the sharks and the turtles, and I think it was the dolphins that she worked with.
Oh, wonderful.
But she had gotten so bad towards the end, she couldn't do it anymore. And so she asked if she could go out as part of this thing that we were doing for the 4 days. She was going to be here. If we could go to see her turtle, the old turtle that was out there. And so we went out, and it just happened on the Rotarian. And the Rotarians that had known her for several years were all out there having an event. So she got to socialize with all of these people that she'd known for a long time, and everybody just really enjoyed her. And she knew more about those fish and things that were out there than some of the other tour guides. So she was explaining to everybody what they were all about, and she'd found out that her turtle had died and they were going to cremate it. And so she spent time crying. She cried a lot this trip for the first time, and that was not normal. But she was having such a good time. And then on Saturday, we were having a mother-daughter day, and we had gone to lunch, and I took her over to get her nails done. And this was a tragic thing that happened. They had known her for a long, long time, and they knew me. And when we walked in, one of the gals that worked there, without thinking, said, "You know, Debbie, you're starting to look like your mom's mother." And that just crushed her. I mean, because she was aging so fast. And her hair had turned white, and from just all these illnesses and things. And so we left, and then keeping it on a positive note again, we were getting the car back fixed up for her so she could take it. And that night, her brothers and sister and all of us went out to the chart house for dinner. And she had her crab and everything that she liked, and everybody was having a good time. And we came back home, and I'm a professional singer, and I do a lot of church singing. And she said, "Mom, would you sing whatever it is you're working on?" And I said, yes. So I started to sing some of these songs, which are very emotional kind of songs. And she sat there and she was crying. I said, "Debbie, I don't want to do this if it's making you feel bad." She says, no, I want to hear it. She wanted to let me know what her final wishes were going to be if something happened to her. And I had written a book called Saying Goodbye with Love, and it was designed for that. And in our lectures and different things that we did with our company, final expense was one of them, where you make your final wishes. So for us to talk like that was nothing uncommon. So she said she wanted to be cremated, which I don't really believe in, but she was very adamant. I said, okay. And she said there are certain songs that I would like, and she told me one of them, what they were in the lullaby and that sort of thing. And so we talked about her music, and she said she would like to have some of her ashes at Moat Marine, because that was one of her happy places. And she wanted her two children, Heidi and Danny, to each have some ashes. And the rest of them would go into our family gravesite, where we're all going to be buried in North Platte, Nebraska. So she was very detailed as to what she wanted, and that was Saturday night. Sunday morning, she was due to go back to North Carolina. And she got in the car, and she got back out again, and she held on to me, and she started crying. She says, "Mom, I don't want to go." And I said, "Well, Deb, you have to go back." And she says, "Please, Mom, I don't want to go back there." And I said, "Go back, have your surgery, and then you come back and you stay with us." And she was crying when she left, because she didn't want to go. And she couldn't get the treatment. She would not have made it if she had stayed here, because she couldn't get the treatment that she needed. So she drove back, and she got in, I think it was about 1 or 2 o'clock Monday morning. And she called me about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we talked for a while, and she sounded great. And she was sitting on the couch that night, I guess about midnight, and just never got up. And then we got the call, because the police came out. They thought it might be suspicious. And her daughter was the first one on the scene. And Heidi called me, and I was on the plane out to be with her. And so it was, it was such a shock, as it always is with any family, because we weren't expecting anything like that. And she was better than we had seen her in those 4 years. I mean, the 4 days that she came out. And because she wanted to be cremated, they took her and did an autopsy, because they wanted to find out what she had died from.
Yeah, because at 40, 49 and
yes, and she'd been doing so well. And the funeral home that she was going to be at happened to be friends of ours because we had made friends over the years from going back there so many times. And so we went over to make arrangements, and she was at the coroner's office, and they were going to take her from the coroner's office straight to the crematory. And I said, no, you're not going to do that. And this was all happening within minutes. And I said, I want to say goodbye. And they said, no, you really don't. You don't want to see her. You really don't. I said, yes, I do. And in the interim, in the mix-up that was going on, the coroner's office did not put her back together again. They had not stitched everything back. So she was put into the coroner's van and brought to the funeral home. And it was just really interesting because the funeral home, knowing us, took her in the back, and he said, Linda, he said, you're not going to be able to touch her because nothing is connected. So they brought her out, and they put some makeup on her, but they had taken a towel and they put it around her head, just a regular bath towel, to hold everything in place. And they had taken a blue velour blanket and put it up under her chin. And what was really funny is the blue velour blanket was the same one that we used to watch TV together back here. It was the exact, same type of blanket. So Heidi, her daughter, wanted to be there and see her again, and I tried to talk her out of it, but I couldn't. And so we were there together and told her goodbye. But that was hard.
Yeah.
Because we couldn't kiss her, couldn't touch her. Finally I said, screw it. We're going to anyway. So we kissed her goodbye. And Heidi wanted to have a service for Debbie. Now, she had not lived in Raleigh for 7 years. Excuse me. I'm bothered just a minute. This was on a Friday. We put an ad in the obituary column. And this storm hit. I mean, it was just a miserable snowstorm. And Heidi had planned this memorial, and I said to her, Heidi, people aren't going to come. You can't. So we were sitting there in the door. Excuse me. The door to the mortuary opened, and there were about 70 people that came. People she hadn't seen in 15, 20 years. So it was lovely, very nice. And so we got on a plane and brought her back with us. And we wanted to have a memorial just for our own family, because not everybody went to Raleigh.
Right,
the kids all stayed here. And so I asked the church if the minister would say a few words. And he said, well, how many people do you think you're going to have? And I said, I think about 7 or 8, just our immediate family. And he said he would love to do the service. So we're sitting there waiting for the service to start, and the doors open up, and all these people started coming in. And I think there was something like 150 people that showed up for that service. And it just amazed me. I just couldn't believe it. And so after that, Moat Marine, who knew her so well, the manager over there said they were going to give us a boat and a captain, and we could go out and put her ashes.
Yeah, which was one of her requests.
Yes, and so that was the third service. And the family went out on the boat, and it was a beautiful day, and it just was lovely. And then we took her to Nebraska to be buried, and we ended up, because she had been born there, and we ended up having 40, 50 people at the gravesite in a sleet storm. I mean, the weather was not working for us. to tell her goodbye. And so that in itself has just been an interesting story.
Yeah, we don't know the lives we touch. We don't, you know, and how beautiful is that every place that she went, people showed up to let you know that she did. So.
Yeah, so she touched so many lives, and I don't think she knew how many she had touched. So from there, the P.A.R.K Foundation was started.
Right, which means, yet again, she's touching lives.
Yes, prescription addiction really kills. And we are now worldwide through social media, and we're nationwide as far as the program itself is concerned. And out of that, we just recently had a walkathon. And we've touched over 2,000 families in the Sarasota, Bradenton, Venice, Newport area.
Yeah, and I was honored to be a part of the walk, your first walk. And,
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think there were 250 some people that showed up for that walk. And there's another lady who just lost her daughter a year ago, Lisa Garvey. And she was at the walk, and she had her daughter who was cremated, and she had her in a teddy bear. And we put Debbie into a teddy bear. And she's actually here with us today, and her urn is inside the teddy bear. And we did not realize the impact that teddy bears were going to have on people, knowing that there was a loved one inside, versus an urn. The urn is very cold. And I had announced that we had our teddy bears there at the walkathon, and we had over 100 people line up to hold the teddy bears and give them kisses and hugs. And from that, I realized that this might be the healing tool that we were looking for the families who come to us looking for answers or looking for a way to help themselves through the grief period, you know, when it's the toughest. And so we have introduced the teddy bear program, and it's called Teddy's Sleeping Angel. And they're designed where you can put the pictures of your loved ones or artifacts or an urn, whatever you want, inside the teddy bear. And what has happened is that wherever we take the teddy bears almost become real.
Yeah, they are.
You know, because they're tangible, you can pick them up and hold them and love them. And we are so excited about this program because it has already just touched so many people's hearts. And, you know, it's just a kind of a fluke that the whole thing came to be.
Well, I want to thank you for coming in and sharing your personal story with us today. I believe that Debbie will go on touching lives, and the direction that you're going in from the loss of your firstborn daughter, we thank you for that as well. And there are some amazing things going on right now with P.A.R.K, what they are doing in our society as well as nationwide. There will be more coming up on these amazing teddy bears and the comfort that they bring to all of us. And there's also a movie premiere that's coming out. So I want you to go to our website, and there'll be a link there that'll tie you back to P.A.R.K, and we will also be putting information about the up and coming events on the site. So I want to end this, as I always do, by saying embrace the journey, because when we do, it can become amazing.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.